Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Andy Evans, and welcome to the final regular season Columbus Wired pregame preview. And you see who's here? It's time. It's time. We are here at the Horseshoe today for the 118th meeting between the undefeated #2 Ohio State Buckeyes welcoming in the undefeated #3 Michigan Wolverines. Look at this. You see that? Can you see that right there? This is it, baby. It almost does not get any bigger than this game today. It is what both teams have been playing for all season long. We all know what's at stake, right? I don't even have to say it, but I'm gonna say it for the sake of this pregame preview. Big Ten East Division title is on the line, which means a trip to the Big Ten championship game, which if the winner of this game wins the Big Ten championship game, they're going to secure a spot in the college football playoff. And it doesn't get any greater than the two winningest football programs of all time in college football squaring up for those kind of stakes on the line today. Like I said, 118th meeting between these two teams, but check this out. This is only the third time ever in the history since 1936, at least in the history of the AP poll era, since 1936 when they began ranking college football teams. This is only the third time ever that these two teams have met one another ranked inside the top 3. I'm going to go into that here in just a minute. And this is actually the 18th time, though, that both teams have met undefeated. Details to come. First off, though, I want to give you a couple of injury updates. Now, nothing official as of yet from Ohio State. Of course, the rumor swirling is Jackson Smith-Njigba going to play. Is Travion Henderson going to play? On the other side of the football for the Wolverines is Blake Corum, their heralded potential Heisman candidate running back, going to play. Well, this just in from Pete Thamel of ESPN, and usually if Pete says it, you can take it for what it's worth. Blake Corum is going to attempt to play. That was what Pete Thamel said. Corum's going to attempt to play. Also, Miyan Williams is going to attempt to play. Of course, we all remember he was held out of last week's game at Indiana because of the injury that he suffered a couple of weeks ago. So, Miyan Williams, we're going to see, and actually I said he was held out against Indiana. He suffered the injury against Indiana. My apologies. I'm thinking of about 20 different things I want to say all at once right now, but Miyan Williams, the injury against Indiana, held out against Maryland last week. And then, of course, we saw Travion Henderson pull up lane after that beautiful screen pass for a touchdown on their first offensive drive of the game against the Terrapins. And then from there, freshman Dallin Hayden carried it out. A heck of a game that guy had. But we're going to get into all of that in just a second. But as I said, Corum, Williams, looking like they're going to at least try to play today. As far as Jackson Smith-Njigba is concerned, no official word yet from Ohio State. But that's probably going to come very, very shortly. So, as I always like to do, I'm going to go into a little bit of the history. And of course, only 117 games played between these two teams, which is the most amount of games that either team has played one another between any other team. No other team has Michigan played more than Ohio State, and no other team more than Michigan has Ohio State played. So, once again, the stakes on this one are huge. And of course, as we know, Michigan is the only team in the Big Ten to have a winning record against the Buckeyes, which currently stands at 59, 51, and 6. So an 8-game advantage for the Wolverines. However, since 2001, the Buckeyes are an astounding 17-3. And that third win that Michigan got since 2001 came, of course, last year, where the Wolverines upset the Buckeyes 42-27 in Ann Arbor, which secured them a spot in their very first Big Ten championship game, and they went on to smash Iowa and ultimately went to the college football playoff. So Buckeyes and Wolverines once again going to battle out for those stakes today. And the last loss that Ohio State had right here on these grounds inside the Horseshoe, 2000. It's been 22 years since Michigan has come into Columbus and beaten the Buckeyes. That was John Cooper's last season. Jim Tressel never lost here. Urban Meyer never lost. And of course, the one Luke Fickell year, he only coached the game where they lost in Ann Arbor in 2011. And Ryan Day technically hasn't lost at home either, but that's because he hasn't played at home. Because, of course, as we all remember, in 2020, the COVID-shortened year, Michigan had to back out because of a large amount of COVID cases, which to this day some Buckeye fans protest, Michigan fans stand behind. Will the truth ever be known? Maybe, maybe not. But nonetheless, the last time these two teams played here was 2018. So it's been 4 years since we've been here at the Horseshoe to witness the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines clashing on the gridiron. Like I said, Ohio State and Michigan, now this is the 18th time that the two teams have met undefeated. However, that's a little skewed because between 1901, which was their very first time meeting undefeated, and 1933, which was 2 years before the two teams decided to play one another at the end of the regular season, there were 13 instances between 1901 and 1933 where the two teams met undefeated, but they hadn't played more than at least 3 games throughout that time. So the fact that there were some games where it was 2-0 Michigan against 2-0 Ohio State, and they still had several games left to play on the schedule. That's 17, at least the 13 meetings there. That's a little bit skewed. However, 4 meetings since 1935 when the two teams decided to play each other at the end of the year. 4 of those meetings have been since 1935. And 3 of them were in the 10-year war between Woody and Bo, 1970, 73, and 75. The last time that the two teams met undefeated, 2006, here in the Horseshoe. We all remember that game, right? The only time ever in the history of the game where both teams were ranked #1 and #2 in the country. And of course the stakes were monumental in that one, right? Because that meant a berth in the BCS National Championship game. And we all remember how it went down. Buckeyes end up pulling out the win by a final score of 42-39. That was the last time ever that these two teams met undefeated. But in the 17 games where the two teams have met undefeated, the winner has gone on to win the conference title 9 times and the national championship 5 times, with 4 going to Michigan. You can tell people, I mean, the fans are already out. People here are excited. I mean, obviously it's palpable, right? You cannot get over the fact that this is just, it's huge. Anyways, I digress. Whenever an Ohio State fan says go Bucks, I kind of have to at least point, respond back, or do something. It's just in my nature. So sorry, folks. 17 meetings. The winner has gone on to win the conference title at least 9 times and the national championship 5 times, with 4 going to Michigan. And in one instance, I'll get to this in a second, in 1973, when both teams were undefeated, neither team won, neither team lost, and neither team won a national championship, but they both won a conference title. And you can, and everybody out there that knows Ohio State and Michigan and the rivalry, you already know where this is going. The two teams ended in a 10-10 tie. But once again, I will get to that in a second. So, 2006, they were #1 versus #2. Ohio State won 42-39 here in the shoe. The only other time that the two teams were ranked in the top 3, 10 years later, 2016, the Buckeyes were #2 with 1 loss. Michigan was #3 with 1 loss. So even though the two teams were ranked #2 and 3, they weren't undefeated, and there was still college football playoff hopes and the potential for Michigan to go to their first Big Ten championship game on the line. But just a little bit of a different feeling from that game and today's game. However, the way that things went down in that 2016 game, me personally, I feel That is one of, if not the greatest Ohio State-Michigan games that ever went down. Why? Double overtime, first off. The only time the two teams have ever gone into an overtime, and it took 2 of them to decide the winner. It took Ohio State 10 fourth-quarter points, including a last-second field goal just to tie it up to take it into overtime. And their only touchdown in that game had been a second-quarter pick 6 by Malik Hooker. And if you remember the defense that year, they had like 7 interceptions returned for touchdowns. Absolutely insane. But the fact that Ohio State had to score 10 fourth-quarter points in a last-second field goal just to take it into overtime. And then, in double overtime, 4th and 1, down by a field goal, and instead of tying it up to take it into overtime number 3, Urban decides he wants to go for it. J.T. Barrett up the middle, and he stopped right there at the first down line of game. Did he get it? Did he not? It's going to be one of those controversial calls that will never probably be decided between Ohio State and Michigan fans until probably ever. It will never be agreed upon. Buckeye fans say he got it. Michigan fans say he didn't. And it was so close. The refs originally ruled a first down, but then they went back to the replay. Instead of bringing out the sticks, which is kind of weird, because typically in those close calls, they bring out the chains. And that's what decides the first down. Instead, the refs went to the replay, viewed the replay, and decided after reviewing the replay that it was a first down and awarded Ohio State a 1st and 10. Very next play, Curtis Samuel on a sweep around the left side gets into the end zone, and the Buckeyes won 30-27 in what was, once again, as far as I'm concerned, one of, if not the greatest Ohio State-Michigan games ever played. So that controversial 4th and 1, though, not the only time that there has been controversy in this game. Going back to that 1973 game, right? As many Ohio State-Michigan fans will remember, both teams undefeated. The Buckeyes were #1 in the country. The Wolverines were #4, and it was an absolute dogfight throughout the entire game. It was a defensive Donnybrook. Like I said, the game ended in a 10-10 tie, but only because Michigan kicker Mike Lantry, with under 2.5 minutes to go, had 2 separate chances to at least take the lead, if not pretty much probably win the game the way things were going, and he missed 2 field goals, including a 58-yarder that to this day Michigan fans still say was good. And it went over the left upright, but the outside of the ball was to the outside of the left upright, and it had gone so high that the refs had to look up and decide, would he have made it or would he have not made it? They ruled the kick no good. However, Lantry still, with under 30 seconds to go on a 3rd and 6, Bo decides we're going to go for the game-winning field goal, and Lantry missed again. 2 field goal opportunities in under 2.5 minutes. The game would end in a 10-10 tie. However, during one of those late 4th quarter drives, quarterback Dennis Franklin got hurt, injured, and not sure if he was going to be able to play in the postseason. And this was back in the day when essentially the Big Ten only sent 1 person to the Rose Bowl. No other teams got to play in the postseason. And so at this point, the Big Ten athletic directors had to get together and decide who's going to be the best representative of our conference in the Rose Bowl. Is it going to be Ohio State, who was looking like the most dominant team in the country and were the odds-on favorite to win a national championship? Or is it Michigan, who now has an injured quarterback and we're not so sure if they're going to be the best option? So the Big Ten athletic directors got together the very next morning on Sunday after the game, had a telephone conference, and they all submitted their vote. All Michigan needed was 5 votes. 5 votes, because the rule back then was that if a team had gone to the Rose Bowl the previous year, they couldn't return the next year. Even if they won the conference, the second place team would play. However, in 1971, they were like, nah, we're gonna do away with that. If you win the conference, regardless of whether you went the previous year or not, if you win the conference, you get to go again. So, but in that regard, because Ohio State had gone the previous season, the 1972 season, they got together and they voted, and they said, all right, is it Michigan? Michigan, all you need is 5. If you tie Ohio State in a vote, you're going. However, Ohio State, because you went last year, you got to get 6 out of 4. Michigan with 4 votes. The Buckeyes got 5 votes, and it came down to one last vote, and that was Michigan State. And of course, Michigan State, not exactly the friendliest of schools with one another. And in fact, for years, Bo had called Michigan State their little sister. And Michigan, the athletic directors had voted not to allow Michigan State into the conference in 1970, just a couple of years before. And so when that happened, Michigan State was like, Ohio State, you get to go. And it absolutely infuriated Bo. He called it one of the lowest points in his coaching career, and virtually never forgave Michigan State or forgot about that instance for the rest of his living days. So this game has certainly not been without its controversy, which brings us to today. Let's hope that we don't see any technical controversy going on. Let's hope that we see an absolute headbanger of a game, which I'm going to get to my prediction here in a second. But this year, these two teams, what have we seen out of them? Well, we've seen 2 top 10 defenses. The Buckeyes right now ranked at the 9th best defense in the country at allowing 283 yards a game. The Wolverines owning the best defense in all of the land at allowing 241 yards a game. So what does that mean for Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud? Well, the guy who is the nation's most efficient passer and who is pretty much the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy and leads the country with 35 passing touchdowns, is going to have to try and throw against the nation's second most efficient passing defense, who is also 5th in passing yards allowed. The Wolverines only allowing 161 passing yards per game. Now, they've only got 8 interceptions on the year, though, so as good as they are at defending the ball, they don't pick it off a whole lot. And that is good for 10th in the Big Ten. But, you know, don't let that stat fool you, because, once again, they are an extremely efficient passing defense. And as we've seen, you know, CJ's been a little iffy these last 3 games. In fact, he hasn't thrown for better than 60% in these last 3 games. Of course, that includes 38% at Northwestern, where he had a career low 38 completion percentage for 76 yards. Of course, the weather conditions were pretty bad that day. Cold, rainy, very windy. He wasn't used to that. We're all willing in Buckeye Nation to give him a pass. You Wolverine fans probably are not willing to give him a pass, but Buckeye Nation, I know, is. Today, obviously, as you can see, the sun is out. It's a little crisp, a little cold. Don't know if you can see my breath. Of course, I'm a moron. I didn't wear my coat today. Mom, I'm sorry. But it's definitely going to be better weather for CJ to be able to throw the football. But once again, 60% now. Completion percentage. The last 3 games, he threw for 60% against Maryland, and he threw for 60% against Indiana. And he struggled at times against good passing defenses. The Hawkeyes, 4th-rated passing defense in the country, and these are current stats. Iowa right now, the 4th best passing defense in the country, and they were good when they played CJ as well. CJ, 66% threw an interception. Wisconsin, who's currently the 34th ranked passing defense in the nation, they were a little better than that. I believe they were like the 11th rated or or 17th rated, one of the two passing defenses at the time when they played them. CJ 63%, 1 interception. Rutgers, who's currently 27th in the country, at the time they were like 11th or 17th. I'm getting Wisconsin and Rutgers mixed up just off the top of my head. But at the time, CJ threw for a season low 59% and 1 interception. Now here's the thing, CJ's only thrown 4 interceptions all year long, 4, but he threw 3 against those 3 defenses. However, versus Wisconsin, he still threw 5 touchdowns. Versus Iowa, he still threw 4 touchdowns. And in the last 2 games, he's thrown for 538 yards and 6 touchdowns. So, and he hasn't thrown an interception since Iowa. So yeah, his completion percentages have been low, and he's thrown an interception here and there. But when you're the nation's most efficient passer at almost 3,000 yards, which all he needs is 9 yards today to go for 3,000, 35 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, I think that's still saying he's having some pretty good football games out there. And let's face it, folks, Michigan, they haven't seen the likes of this receiving corps. They've seen some good receivers. They've seen Keon Coleman from Michigan State. Really, other than that, I mean, if you look at like who they played, I mean, you know, Penn State. I mean, Ohio State faced Penn State as well, and Penn State really doesn't have a great offense to speak of. So Michigan, they're going to go up against it today, facing the likes of guys like Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, and Marvin Harrison Jr., who has over 1,000 yards receiving. He's 8th in the country with 1,037 receiving yards, and he is tied for 2nd with 11 touchdown grabs on the year. You throw in a guy like Cade Stover, who's been a great safety valve and is actually 3rd on the team right now with 31 receptions, has like over 300 yards receiving and like what, 3 touchdown catches. This Michigan defense is going to have their hands full. But let's look at the other side of the football now. Ohio State's 15th ranked defense taking on Michigan's 4th rated rushing offense. And that's Ohio State's 15th ranked rushing defense against Michigan's 4th rated rushing offense. The Buckeyes are allowing 107 yards a game, whereas Michigan is averaging 243 yards on the ground per game. That's primarily been on the legs of Blake Corum. In fact, Blake Corum did not have a triple-digit rushing game until the start of the Big Ten season, and ever since then, he's had over 100 yards per game. So that's what, 8 games? 8 straight games with over 100 yards per game. Sits 4th in the country right now with 1,457 yards, and he's tied for 2nd with 18 touchdowns. And once again, Pete Thamel saying Blake Corum's going to try to play. He's going to try to play. He's going to try to play. So we'll see if number 2 suits up for the Maize and Blue here in a couple of hours. But don't forget about sophomore Donovan Edwards, who has also carried the ball 70 times for 471 yards and 4 touchdowns. However, he's dinged up, and he hasn't played since the first series of the Nebraska game 2 weeks ago, and not real sure what's going on with him, but the mystery is in speculation is that it's some sort of upper body injury. Not real sure. Harbaugh's remained moot. Of course, he's remained moot on Blake Corum as well. So if that's the case, if both Corum and Edwards are held out for today's game, probably means that true freshman CJ Stokes is going to get the ball today. And he might even share it with junior Isaiah Cash, both of whom have combined for a total on the season of 72 carries for 385 yards and 3 touchdowns. So not a lot of experience for guys like CJ Stokes, a true freshman, and even Isaiah Cash, a junior, who haven't had a lot of experience, and especially coming into a game like this. That might that might spell, I don't want to say doom for Michigan, because I think that those guys are formidable enough that they can at least form a ground attack. But if that happens, that means they're going to have to rely on J.J. McCarthy and the passing game. Which J.J. McCarthy, let me go check his stats out real quick. You know, he hasn't set the world on fire. But here's the thing about McCarthy. 1,900 yards passing on the season. He's only got 14 touchdowns, but he's only thrown 2 interceptions. So even though McCarthy's stats don't jump out on paper to you, he's an efficient quarterback. He's been very efficient with the football, and he can run it too. If you force him to run, he'd rather throw and hand it off. But if you force McCarthy out of the pocket, he's got some legs. He can make some scrambles. So with all of that being said, what's my final thought? Here's what it comes down to. Putting pressure on the quarterback, converting on 3rd and 4th down, and getting into the red zone, okay? When it gets to getting to the quarterback, no team right now is better in the Big Ten as well as the country practically than the Buckeyes. They are tops in the conference, 2nd in the country, tied for 2nd actually, with only having allowed 7 sacks all season long, and it's been some times where C.J. Stroud has had to scramble out of the pocket and make some plays himself. We've seen him doing that here lately, especially for a guy who said it wasn't his job to run. Remember that comment last year? I think maybe he heard a little bit of criticism from Buckeye Nation and thought, you know what, I can run. There are some times I will need to run, and he has done some of that this year. Michigan, on the other hand, very good as well. 3rd in the Big Ten, 16th in the country when allowing sacks. They've only allowed 12. And when it comes to getting to the quarterback, both teams currently tied for 2nd in the conference with each other with 31 sacks on the year. And here's the thing about 3rd and 4th down. Michigan excels at not allowing teams to convert on 3rd and 4th down. In fact, only 30% of the time have teams been able to convert on both 3rd and 4th down against the Wolverines. And getting a 1st down against them, extremely difficult. Michigan right now, 3rd in the country in allowing 1st downs against them. And we've seen OSU's offense struggle at times when it comes to converting on 3rd downs. But check this out. They're actually the Big Ten's 2nd most efficient 3rd down converting team at 47.8%. So as much guff as Buckeye Nation and fans have given Ohio State for converting on 3rd down, they're actually 2nd in the conference at converting almost 48% of the time, which is actually almost 1% higher than the Wolverines, who come in right behind them in 3rd place in the conference at 46.9%. And on 4th down, this is where it's going to get interesting, because you're talking about 2 of the country's top 5 teams, with the Wolverines converting more 4th downs than any other offense in the country at 87%. 87% of the time that Michigan has gone for it on 4th, they have gotten it. That is best in the country. And the Buckeyes are not far behind them, 5th in the country. When they go for it on 4th down, they convert 3 out of every 4 times, 75%. And when it comes to 4th down defense, you're looking at Ohio State's 11th rated 3rd down defense. The Buckeyes are 11th in the country on 3rd down, only allowing teams to convert 29% of the time, and they're 9th best in the country at 30%. So both teams very, very good not allowing teams to convert on 3rd and 4th down against their defense, but they're very, very good when it comes to converting on offense. So 3rd and 4th down is going to be a battle, as well as getting into and scoring when in the red zone. Here's the deal. When you get in against Ohio State, you've got a 90% chance when you're in the red zone of scoring. 90% chance. However, getting to the red zone in the first place is where teams have had difficulty. The Buckeyes right now are tied for 2nd in the country, having only allowed 22 times all season long, 22 trips into their red zone. Now, once you get in, you've got a 90% chance you're going to score, but just getting there is tough. However, Michigan, even tougher getting into their red zone. 19 times have they allowed teams all season long, which is #1 in the country, to get into their red zone. Now, once you get into their red zone, you got a 79% chance of scoring, but just getting there is going to be a task. So there's my synopsis. Who puts the most pressure on the quarterback? Can Ohio State stop Michigan's run? Can Michigan stop C.J. Stroud in this prolific offense? Who converts more 3rd and 4th downs? And who gets to the red zone more often? The team that does better at those stats is going to win today's game. Now, because of superstition reasons, I typically like to give a score, right? I like to tell you guys who I think is going to win. Most of the time, it's Ohio State. However, when it comes to this game, as most people know, I'm very superstitious. I do not like to bet because, of course, yes, even though I am a member of the media, I will admit I am an Ohio State graduate. I grew up 30 minutes east of Columbus, Ohio, and anybody who knows me and knows my family knows that I grew up every Saturday in front of the TV. My dad made sure that we were rooting for the Buckeyes. So, when it comes to this game, I don't like, for superstitious reasons, to make a prediction, but I will tell you this. Get ready. Get ready. Buckeye Nation, if you think the Wolverines are going to come in here and lay down, or that Ohio State is going to be so fired up because of what happened last year, that they're just going to come out here and smash Michigan, or Michigan fans, if you think that you've got a legitimate shot to come in here and roll over Ohio State because of how you guys played last year, all I got to say is I don't believe that either way. Get ready. You are about to witness what could potentially be one of the greatest classics in the 118-game history going down here today at Ohio Stadium, November 26th, 2022. So there you have it, folks. I appreciate you guys checking this out. My goodness, we are at half an hour. I have rambled on for half an hour. Most of these don't go this long, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time. You probably didn't even make it this far anyways, but if you did, God love you. Until the post-game recap, everybody take care and enjoy what should be a hell of a football game today.